Hey folks, this President's Day, skip the endless mattress sales and celebrate like the founding fathers really would have with some sticky, fresh farm hemp flour from our friends at Sunset Lake Seder. Honor our founding fathers in the way that we would by relaxing and not deifying them. Sunset Lake can be a part of this occasion. To honor it, they are releasing two brand new flower strains. Suver Haze, perfect for staying relaxed, focused, and productive during the day. Sour Lifter, a mellow, funky take on the best-selling Lifter strain. And here's the best part. You can try these new strains and their smokables for 30% off. Just use code NEWFLOWER, all one word, at checkout. I am a Sunset Lake regular user, particularly their gummies with melatonin that help me go to sleep. And so taking advantage of this sale, if you are interested in these products, is probably a good idea because 30% off is no joke. The sale started yesterday and it ends February 23rd at midnight Eastern. So again, that's 30% off Seder smokables with code NEWFLOWER. With these two new strains released. I have the lotion here that I use now that skin's getting dry. It's really, really dry up here in New York and cold, especially today. And I'm staying in more, so I'm using more Sunset Lake Seder to relax. And you can go over there now, sunsetlakeseder.com. Use code FLOWER to save, use code NEWFLOWER to save 30% off on all Seder smokables. This sale ends February 23rd at midnight. See their site for additional terms and conditions. Again, that's sunsetlakeseder.com. Use code NEWFLOWER, all one word. Save 30% on all Seder smokables. See their site for additional terms and conditions. And now time for the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Molly White of the Citation Needed newsletter will be with us to talk about crypto, the Trump administration, and what it could mean for our economy. Also on the program, hours after Trump announced mass firings at the FDA so Musk can bring in his SpaceX workers instead, a Delta flight crashes and flips. 80 people on board. Thankfully, they're okay. At least some are hospitalized, but they've survived. The head of the food division at the FDA resigns after more mass firings, including those reviewing the safety of Elon Musk's Neuralink brain chip that keeps killing monkeys. Musk turns his sights on gutting the SEC next, which, like the coincidence with Neuralink at the FDA, sued him in 2022 for not disclosing his Twitter stock and underpaying his investors by $150 million. Birds of a feather, him and Trump. A majority of the probationary employees Trump and Musk have fired citing poor performance had good performance reviews, the superiors tell the press. We'll get to that later in the show. Trump's directive has the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission drop all trans discrimination cases. A USAID worker sues the Trump administration over his wife's pregnancy scare abroad. because the funding freeze made it so they couldn't evacuate. Trump nominates Ed Martin, a Stop the Steal organizer, as U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C. Kathy Hochul is meeting with key Democrats today, including Hakeem Jeffries, about removing Eric Adams. It's been a long time coming. He's literally being blackmailed, so can't do his job. Mexico threatens to sue Google over capitulating to Trump's Gulf of America stunt. Rubio and Waltz are in Saudi Arabia, meeting with Russian officials, negotiating over the war in Ukraine. The death toll in Kentucky rises to 14 after horrific floods. And lastly, some good news finally. Indigenous activist Leonard Peltier free after nearly 50 years spent on a widely discredited conviction for killing 2 FBI agents. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. Post Coconut Clarity writes in, Adams isn't being blackmailed, he's being extorted. Hashtag words mean things. Okay. All right. Extorted, blackmailed. I think both can kind of work, depending on the definition, but I see we've decided to be pedantic today. That's fine. That's fine. He's being extorted. That's fine. Yeah, whatever. I say he's being blackmailed. Doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, extortion is a general term for obtaining something through threats or coercion, while blackmail is a specific type of extortion that involves threatening to reveal secrets.
Okay, so the pedant was correct. and I'm incorrect. But yes, he's being extorted. Thank you very much. You're right. This is why we rely on our audience.
Probably he's being blackmailed too, but we don't know about that.
He's being extorted. I appreciate the English majors in our IMs very much. So let's talk about this here. Over the weekend, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration left her position after Elon Musk and the Doge, Groyper, Twinks posters demanded access to the sensitive data at the administration, which is a theme across this less than, full month of Trump being in office, which is Elon Musk, who is trying to set up a banking service via X, formerly Twitter, has been combing around in the financial records of every American individual, nonprofit, and business, and seemingly feeding it into his AI or his algorithm. We still don't necessarily know what exactly he's doing with this information. Not that it matters, because it's a massive agreed upon security and privacy breach, funneling our most sensitive information to the world's richest man, who is also a complete lunatic that believes we're going to be able to colonize Mars or whatever. And
Politico still calling it an efficiency and government regulation trimming operation too, which is really stupid for
real lie.
News organization to say.
Yeah, news organizations need to be more explicit about it. I mean, even their fear about calling his Nazi salute what it was. It was proven correct in the same week when he went to meet or went to speak at the AfD far-right rally in Germany about forgetting their past, and previously having endorsed anti-Semitic conspiracy theories on that platform. Like, he has, with his massive amounts of wealth, intimidated vast swaths of the press, and has been going after this federal workforce for weeks at this point. So the Social Security Administration acting commissioner left her position. Her name was Michelle King. She had spent several decades working on behalf of Social Security so that our seniors nearly can get their payments. Nearly 2/3 of seniors kept out of poverty due to Social Security. It's one of our most important government functions, if not the most important government function, that or Medicare. It's hard to say. But last week, like we saw at the DOJ, Trump had to basically bypass a bunch of senior executives at the Social Security Administration to get his Bork, somebody who would sign off on giving Elon Musk access to the Social Security data. And here he is last week at the Oval Office in this weird press conference where he used his son as a human shield, spreading the conspiracy theory that has the false claim, the lie that has continued into this week about Social Security. This is how it originated, or at the very least, how he introduced this to the public.
Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people.
Like AI.
I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical. I think it's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, there's crazy things like
Pause real quick.
Grocery.
That's what Congress does when they pass those bills.
Yep, they go. Also, Social Security is self-funding. People pay into it their entire lives, and you don't need to find the fraud that he's describing. We'll debunk it in a second, but 69 million Americans rely on Social Security.
Yeah, but let's spend billions of dollars to give this guy to make spy satellites.
It's essentially a pension fund for retirees that we've made into a federal government program. So this is not the place to look for waste, fraud, and abuse, but that's not what he's looking for. He's trying to steal our data so he can make more money with his banking service.
So, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately.
Accurately receive it.
I'll tell you another crazy thing. So, one of the things is like we're.
All right, he goes off on another tangent. So, people who deserve it receive it. Every American that has worked is paying into Social Security. This is how it gets funded. When you pay your taxes, you're paying into Social Security. There's nobody who's undeserving of Social Security who is paying into Social Security. Broadly.
That benefit fraud thing, like there was something in Japan, I believe it was, where it was literally moving their age expectations up because there are so many people actually doing this. But even in that scenario, this is a fraction of what the government actually pays. And the idea that we're looking at this sort of thing, this low-level petty like benefit fraud, which happens but at a minuscule level, instead of the amount we're giving to the Pentagon to lose in foreign wars and stuff like that, it's a big con. It
is, and he's also so dumb that he's misreading the data that he's describing here, as are his little minions. But here's Caroline Leavitt last night on Sean Hannity's show responding to the freak out about this, rightly, that people are like, oh my gosh, Social Security, this is one of the most popular programs in the country. And Musk's lie about the 150-year-old plus people is repeated here by the White House spokesperson.
Yeah, there's no evidence about that.
This is a promise President Trump campaigned on. He is now delivering on it. And I've been fighting fake news reporters all day long here in the Washington, D.C. swamp, who are trying to fearmonger the American people into believing that this administration is going after their hard-earned tax dollars and their hard-earned Social Security checks. So I want to set the record straight on your show tonight, Sean, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do so. President Trump has directed Elon Musk and the Doge team to identify identify fraud at the Social Security Administration. They haven't dug into the books yet, but they suspect that there are tens of millions of deceased people who are receiving fraudulent Social Security payments. And so their goal in going into the Social Security Administration is to identify three things. Number one, to identify duplicate payments and to end them. Number two, to identify payments that are going to deceased people who are no longer living and should no longer be receiving that money. And number three, to protect the integrity of this system for hardworking Americans who have been paying into it their entire lives. So rest assured to all of the people watching your show tonight, if you paid into the system, honestly, you will continue to receive your Social Security checks. Do not buy into the lies from the legacy fake news media who are trying to fear you and scare you into believing otherwise. This is what we've seen them do about President Trump for years with every promise that he has made. And he's going in there to protect your hard-earned money. That is the ultimate goal.
That is not the ultimate goal. They have to reassure the gerontocratic audience of Fox News that their Social Security payments, which many of them rely on, are not going to be touched. But here's the reality. Wired, which has been doing incredible reporting really since Trump got inaugurated, covering Musk in particular and his efforts, have debunked this. And listen to how silly this is. Scroll down to the part that starts with computer programmers. Computer programmers quickly claimed that the 150 figure was not evidence of fraud, but rather the result of a weird quirk of the Social Security Administration's benefit system, which was largely written in COBOL, C-O-B-O-L, a 60-year-old programming language that undergirds SSA's databases, as well as systems from many other U.S. government agencies. COBOL, C-O-B-O-L, is rarely used today, and as such, Musk's cadre of young engineers may well be unfamiliar with it, because COBOL does not have a date type. Some implementations rely on a system where all dates are coded to a reference point. The most commonly used is May 20th, 1875, as this was the date of an international standard-setting conference held in Paris known as the Convention du Mètre. These systems default to the reference point when a birth date is missing or incomplete, meaning all of those entries in 2025 would show an age of 150. That's just one possible explanation for what Doge allegedly found. Musk could also have simply looked up the Social Security Administration's own website, which explains that since September 2015, the agency has automatically stopped benefit payments when anyone reaches the age of 115. 115! So they've automatically done that. Are there going to be a few cases that slip through the cracks? Potentially. But it's on its own website, debunking the premise of his entire claim. However, on Monday morning, Musk doubled down, posting a screenshot of what he claims were figures from the Social Security database to X, writing that the numbers of people in each age bucket with the death field set to false. The figure suggests that over 10 million people aged over 120 were collecting benefits. Maybe Twilight is real and there are a lot of vampires collecting Social Security. Oh, a Twilight reference! How topical! Musk wrote.
What a science genius.
The database Musk took the screenshot from listed almost 400 million people, which is more than 5 times the number of people receiving benefits in 2024, according to the Social Security Administration's own website. It's also significantly more than the entire United States population. So the genius coder, who's not a coder, or, what he thinks he's an engineer, but he's never really invented anything in his life, except for Teslas that are more unsafe than the Ford Pinto, that Cybertruck, except for Neuralink, which keeps killing monkeys, except
SpaceX, which keeps dropping satellites into air traffic routes.
Yeah. He was an early investor in PayPal, was kicked out of that, tried to make it into X. He did buy into Tesla, that's true. But he really wants to think of himself as this genius coder, but he couldn't figure out that was essentially a reference point for data that was incomplete. And none of his little Groyper neo-Nazi 4chaners could figure that out either. Damn. Maybe you've got to expand your hiring pool for Doge outside of the Discord. Insane.
Hitchens' razor, coined by Christopher Hitchens. What can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. It is crazy that we are, a month into this almost? And none of the claims of fraud or whatever has been substantiated at all with anything other than that sort of screenshot bullshit, which is immediately debunkable. And yet we still have major institutions. Wired's doing a great job. Politico, though, every single time they mention Doge, they credit it as a good faith regulation and bureaucratic bloat cutting mechanism. What they're doing is slashing the government so they can give tax cuts to all the rich people.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing right now, including looking at Social Security, because that is a big place that they see that the way we should look at them, as a giant piñata to smash and get money out of.
Can we pull up this this sheet that lastly here that shows exactly how many people over the age of 100 are receiving Social Security? It is public. What's incredible is when they pretend this is a private business and that there's a sense of secrecy here. All of this information is public because it is the government. Right at the bottom, it shows the figure 99 and over. 89,106. That's the figure. Not the
those vampires.
8+ million. I heard Sean Hannity say in that interview with Levitt. People that are receiving Social Security benefits, they are lying at such a rapid pace to disorient everybody, to make it more difficult to fight back against them. And they are. We'll get into the way that they're targeting these probationary federal workers as well. They are trying to destroy the mechanisms right now that would potentially hamper them from doing this as quickly as possible.
And this is a table from December of last year. How many people would be receiving these checks age 99 and over? And James Suriwiecki, the author, writer here who found this, also tweeted 89,106 is, as it happens, fewer than the number of centenarians in the U.S. as estimated by the census. So we are, again, not sending out billions in Social Security checks to people aged 130.
There you have it. Just dumb people. All right, folks, we're going to be talking to Molly White in just a second, but first, a word from one of our favorite sponsors. Sam particularly loves Factor. It is easy for him as a parent because he can give his son the fresh meals that he likes, and even if he's sometimes picky about it, he knows that Factor has his back, and it helps you optimize your nutrition. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well so easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. We want to thank Factor for sponsoring the Majority Report and supporting us. Factor lets you do you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for your lifestyle. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST, one word, to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it is easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. I'm already... March is the month where I'm really cracking down on my fitness prior to my wedding, and the Factor is already in my plans. You could say I'm factoring it in because I want to get, stop eating candy at 11 p.m.
I've heard Factor is a hit among nurses.
Ooh, well, there we go. More and more people speaking well about Factor and how convenient and good for you it is. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST, one word, to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right. A word from one of our other sponsors. Sam will be speaking to you about that, and then we'll be talking to Molly White.
Today's program is sponsored by Nutrafol. couple of years ago, I started taking Nutrafol. Why? Because I was feeling like I'm a little thinning on this side, a little bit up here. And I wanted my hair not to be thinning, and I wanted it to be in healthy shape. But I also didn't want to take any drugs. And Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand. It is trusted by 1.5 million people. I guess 1.5 million plus one, me. See thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. This is what I noticed. Up here, I've noticed less thinning, but the thing I really notice is that when I dry my hair in the morning with the towel, I don't look at it and go, what is going on? And that honestly, like, I am almost less concerned with like the hair on my head than actually having to wake up and look at it when I dry my hair on my thing.
I thought I was balding in college because I grew my hair out long and it was always all over my towels in the shower.
It was bothering me. Thinning hair, though, is different for men and women. One size fits all approach to hair growth doesn't cut it. Nutrafol has multiple formulas for men, multiple formulas for women that are tailored to different life stages, such as postpartum or menopause, lifestyle factors such as a plant-based lifestyle, all things like that, so you can get just what you need. It's physician-formulated, 100% drug-free ingredients. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, metabolism, through whole body health. Some supplements rely on ingredient studies. Nutrafol clinically tests its final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 72% of men saw more scalp coverage after taking Nutrafol men hair growth supplement for 6 months. 86% of women saw improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol women hair growth supplement for 6 months. Building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required, automated deliveries and free shipping, keeping you on track. Plus, with a Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. You're going to have access to free naturopathic doctor consults, and a Headspace meditation membership is also included because underneath your hair is your brain. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafof, Nutrafol. Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code TMR. We'll put a link in the podcast and YouTube description.
We are back, and we are joined now by Molly White, researcher, software engineer, and the woman behind the Citation Needed newsletter covering the crypto industry. Molly, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's just go back to the election a bit. Can you talk a little bit about crypto spending and how much money was poured into this election on both sides of the presidential race, and just more than the presidential race, even in major Senate elections like in Ohio, that comes to mind?
Yeah, so the crypto industry spent really heavily on mostly congressional races, actually, as you mentioned, this election cycle. They raised over $200 million, and they spent more than $130 million of that on congressional races. Some of them were really big ticket races, like the $40 million they spent in the Ohio Senate race. But they spent very widely and in varying amounts across races throughout the United States. In some cases to support specific candidates, and in some cases to oppose candidates that they saw as threats to the crypto industry. They did spend somewhat on presidential races, not through the super PACs that they created, but as individual crypto founders and companies that were donating to Trump's super PAC primarily, although one crypto founder did also support Kamala Harris.
Who's that founder? Just to keep in the back of my head.
It's one of the people behind Ripple, which is a stablecoin company. Although some other executives of that company supported Trump, so it's a bit of a mixed bag over there.
Well, I'm wondering, because there was a story that we've talked about numerous times now just because of how much it infuriated us, that 2 weekends ago, I think at this point, Hakeem Jeffries went out to Silicon Valley to make nice with the tech people, which I assume includes a lot of crypto folks. And I'm wondering, who are the crypto people that are getting people like Senator Gillibrand to talk about how we need to regulate the industry and formalize it, as opposed to, I don't know, kill it altogether because it's mindless speculation that is massive transfers of wealth to the top of people who already have a bunch of money?
Yeah, so a lot of that is coming out of some of the biggest crypto companies that probably spring to mind when you think of the crypto industry. So Coinbase, for example, has been very heavily involved in lobbying and in political spending. Ripple has been very involved. The Winklevoss twins, who are behind the Gemini cryptocurrency exchange and also are heavily invested in the sector. Venture capital companies like Andreessen Horowitz have spent very heavily and have been involved in the lobbying as well. And as you allude to, there has been this very concerted effort to try to convince politicians that crypto is this important issue that not only they need to care about from a policy perspective in order to support the crypto industry, which they claim is, a crucial part of the American economy, but that this is actually something that voters cared about, and that, a candidate could win or lose their election based on supporting the crypto industry, which was not actually a particularly true narrative, but it was something that the crypto industry was heavily claiming as a part of their goals to sort of buy support from various congressional leaders who are either up for re-election or who were aiming to be elected for the first time.
You mentioned Andreessen Horowitz, and I want to get back to Mark Andreessen in particular and the debanking fixation that he has and what that really means. But how did crypto get from the central libertarian premise of wanting cryptocurrency to be outside of the whims of the fiat currency in the United States, and an asset that is not going to be at the whims of the dollar, essentially, to now relying on U.S. government intervention to uphold the industry, and even discussions about integrating crypto and pegging it not to like a stable coin, but to the U.S. dollar? Is that not a part of the consideration now, like some of what these folks are discussing?
Yeah, so a lot of the original crypto ideology about, getting away from American government control of money and avoiding intermediaries and, being able to transact freely without government intervention or oversight, that has really fallen by the wayside in recent years. I think as crypto companies have realized that it is actually extremely lucrative to have the support of the US government and not be sort of in an adversarial position with them. There are some smaller, crypto projects that still hang on to that original ideology. And you do hear a lot of those talking points repeated by crypto executives, even the billionaires who are donating massive amounts to Trump. But in reality, I think they have strayed very far from that ideology and have realized that it is far more profitable to be this sort of unregulated shadow financial system that is, at least nominally endorsed by the US government, while having very few of the regulations and consumer protections that traditional financial companies have to comply with, which can make it very expensive to be in the financial industry. And so rather than creating this alternative or a sort of subversive version of a financial system, they are really just mirroring the existing financial system, but without the protections that have been learned over hundreds of years of very painful lessons through financial collapses and scams and frauds and, devastation on people who get involved with those types of systems.
Can you explain the differences in how a traditional bank is regulated and what agency mechanisms are used to regulate that bank, and how crypto is outside of that?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of different regulators that sort of work together to oversee banks, some at the federal level, some are state regulators. But, the long and short of it is that you can open a bank account, you can put your money in there, you can have a lot of trust in your bank without having to do an enormous amount of like due diligence on whichever bank you choose because everything is backstopped by the federal government. And so if your bank collapses, you're going to be fine because, up to $250,000 per bank account is insured by the FDIC, which is a federal agency. And so people trust very much in the US banking system because no one has lost money since the FDIC was instituted, despite
Although
the fact
SoftBank, we saw them trying to skirt some of those requirements too, if you recall, right? People putting a little under 250K in a bunch of bank accounts. So they still try, but yeah, regular people are more protected.
Right. And of course, people who, invest in banks sometimes lose money if banks collapse and things like that. But depositors are protected up to that amount. And so people trust in their banks. But there has been separation between what banks are allowed to do and what crypto companies might like to do. And so there have been these firewalls between banks sort of embracing cryptocurrency activities. And so, for example, when a bank has said, we want to offer customers the ability to buy Bitcoin right from their mobile banking app where they deposit their paycheck, the FDIC has said, I don't know about that. Let's ask a bunch of questions, maybe ask you to hold off on that while we investigate regulations. Banks were trying to put Bitcoin ATM kiosks in their lobbies. There were all of these efforts that the FDIC put the brakes on, and other banking regulators have put the brakes on because of the concern that people will assume that, among other things, that their FDIC insurance applies to the Bitcoin that they purchase in their mobile banking app, which is not the case. And that people will believe that crypto companies that are offering services like this have the same backing and backstop as a bank account, which is very much not the case. And in fact, we have actually seen a lot of cryptocurrency companies try to mislead their customers into thinking that their accounts are just as safe as bank accounts. For example, with Celsius, which was a crypto company that collapsed and went bankrupt because of massive fraud behind the company. The CEO is currently pleaded guilty in the United States and is going to be sentenced to prison time, most likely. And they were basically claiming to customers that their assets were as safe or even safer than those in a bank account, which is plainly not the case.
Right. And that 250K threshold that you describe, that was under Dodd-Frank, right? Where that protected folks after the financial collapse up to that amount when they were banking, up to 250K, as you mentioned. But we still haven't reinstated Glass-Steagall, right? Which prevents these banks from gambling with depositor money in some of these riskier ways. Dodd-Frank did do a good job there, but what is the risk now of further potentially allowing these banks to further integrate themselves with the crypto industry, as you described? Like if I'm going to open my Bank of America app, and like when I open my Venmo app, which is just about individual transactions, it gives you the opportunity to buy crypto. Is that on the table where I'm going to open my TD Bank app or whatever, or Chase, and they're going to say, hey, you want to put a portion of your savings into crypto?
I suspect we'll be seeing that very soon. The regulations on what banks are allowed to do, how traditional finance is allowed to become sort of enmeshed with the cryptocurrency industry, are very much under attack right now, largely because of this campaign, this lobbying from the crypto industry, which would love to see those firewalls that prevent banks from getting hung up in the crypto industry torn down so that they can get access to more customers. We have seen those firewalls actually work reasonably well so far. So, for example, in 2022, FTX collapsed, trillions of dollars went missing. Customers were financially devastated if they had cryptocurrency with FTX. And even those who didn't were devastated because the entire crypto market plummeted in connection to that collapse. But everyday people, who had their money in a bank account or who had money in the stock market or, were uninvolved with the cryptocurrency industry probably wouldn't have noticed if it wasn't for, newspaper headlines about Sam Bankman-Fried. And that's because there was no contagion with the banking system, with large parts of traditional finance. And the goal from the cryptocurrency industry is to reduce that firewall so that honestly, that kind of contagion could very well happen the next time around. And as we've seen from the history of the cryptocurrency industry, these collapses are common. It's a cycle where crypto grows to new heights, prices go even higher than they ever did, and then they crash even further than they did the last time around. And despite this happening over and over and over again, we're now getting calls for less regulation in the crypto industry, more access to customers of banks and other financial institutions. We're seeing traditional finance embrace crypto through the offering of Bitcoin ETFs and other sort of traditional finance adjacent products that you can buy through your brokerage account. So this type of contagion, I think, is a very, very dangerous possibility in the next handful of years.
Can you explain or expand a little bit more on traditional banks creeping more and more into integrating themselves with crypto? We're seeing, I saw another great crypto writer and contributor to the AM Quickie, Jacob Silverman, pointing out that certain pension funds are becoming exposed to crypto as we speak. What are the mechanisms by which traditional banks are already using crypto and integrating it in, and in addition to the ones that we just talked about, how else would this work?
I mean, it's kind of any way you can imagine. They're sort of trying to integrate it in sort of any possible way. We've seen banks talking about offering loans against cryptocurrencies, so you could potentially put your Bitcoin up and borrow US dollars against that, for example. Crypto companies already do this.
I'm sorry. Just would that be mortgages?
It would be anything you wanted to get a loan for. So potentially mortgages, yes. In fact, Coinbase, after the administration has reinstated a program to lend people dollars against their crypto and actively marketed it as, this is a good way to get money for a down payment for a house. So that is one way that we're seeing them do it. Banks holding crypto sort of on their balance sheets is something that we're starting to see them interested in, and even other companies as well. Exposure to crypto adjacent assets like these ETFs, which, you're not actually holding Bitcoin, for example, but you are holding an asset that is pegged to the price of Bitcoin. Banks offering custody services and other banking services or crypto related services for crypto companies where, instead of a bank just holding the US dollars and providing, payroll and normal banking options for a cryptocurrency company, they would actually be taking on crypto asset custody risk and taking control of, crypto assets. Banks have talked about wanting to put their activities on the blockchain. I mean, it's really anything you can imagine.
And the ETFs, the exchange, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the acronym.
Exchange Traded Fund, yeah.
Exchange Traded Fund. What does that underlie for a lot of folks, whether it's in their retirement accounts or, what role does that serve and why does integrating crypto into it present such a risk?
Well, the ETFs really just add another avenue through which people can get exposure to Bitcoin. So, it used to be that you had to get a crypto trading app and figure out how to convert your money and, put it into a crypto wallet, and you had to keep custody of your crypto tokens, which is sometimes challenging to do. And, there's all of this sort of work that goes into holding crypto. Whereas with a crypto ETF, you buy it through your brokerage account, like you might buy a stock or any other ETF or, a
Right.
mutual fund. And this has added sort of new ways for people and also institutions to get exposure to cryptocurrency. And it also means that as we're seeing more funds being built out, I think there is additional risk that we're seeing people who have exposure to cryptocurrency without necessarily realizing it. Meaning that, there are these sort of combined funds, index funds that are beginning to incorporate these products. We even saw, there's a company called MicroStrategy, which is ostensibly a software company, but it's mostly just a holding company for Bitcoin. And they were recently added to the top NASDAQ index, meaning that if you hold, an index fund that has a basket of NASDAQ traded stocks in it, you might have access or exposure to Bitcoin volatility because one of those companies is in that index fund. And so, increasingly we're seeing these sort of venues through which people end up with exposure to crypto companies without necessarily even realizing it or being made fully aware of the risks involved with those types of assets.
How is not notifying people who may have, say, their retirement invested in this kind of thing? How is that legal that they can basically incorporate a highly speculative, volatile asset into people's savings and that not be something that they're notified about?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, I guess. I mean, I think a lot of the time it's really just people are not reading the fine print. And so, you of course can go and look at exactly which stocks are in your index fund, but people don't always do that.
Right.
And then there's, other ways that this exposure is added that people just may not understand. So, for example, pension funds, buying some amount of cryptocurrency or cryptocurrency ETFs, and then including those as, a part of the basket of assets that they use for the retirement fund. That's something that we're beginning to see. We even saw it, as sort of a warning sign during the FTX collapse, where a Canadian pension fund had exposure to, basically the FTX collapse and lost money as a result of it. And yet it's something that we're seeing actively marketed to pension fund providers, to retirement account managers, and so on, as a good way to, potentially save for retirement, which is alarming.
And can you just explain a bit more why banks would want to get more involved in this, get in on the fun? I mean, a lot of it's sometimes this isn't the easiest thing for me to understand, so I appreciate you working with me, but so many of the people that bought these, like Bitcoin, got in really early and bought it in bulk. And a lot of this is just to drive up their asset.
Right.
And so if the banks didn't get in on this as early, what is their incentive to get in on the fun now? Is it just because more coins keep getting created and they can then buy it up in bulk and use it as a speculative asset? Is that the goal?
I think it's really a mix of things. Part of it is that people see it as sort of like any other risky asset where the upside is potentially really high. And so they're willing to take on the risk because the return might be massive. And, even though it's really not possible to accumulate the amounts of Bitcoin that some of the earliest Bitcoin investors, if you want to call it that, have, people still, accumulate substantial amounts of it. And we do see these price swings every time the the market crashes and then, recovers to some extent. So around the time of the FTX collapse, Bitcoin was as low as like $16,000. Now it's up to like $100,000 per Bitcoin. And so people see that potential upside as very tempting, even though it can just as easily go in the opposite direction and regularly does. But I think a lot of it is also just there is so much hype around cryptocurrency, and banks are afraid of being seen as old-fashioned or, slow to follow the latest financial trends. They want to communicate to their customers that they're cutting edge and that they are, trying to incorporate all of this new fancy technology, and crypto is a way for them to do that. There are countless amounts of dollars spent on convincing people who work at banks and other financial institutions that they need to get on the bandwagon because crypto is cool and it will attract their customers and they can make all this money off of it by providing crypto related products to their banking customers. And I think that drives a lot of it is this sort of FOMO end of things, which, retail investors are probably very familiar with, but is very prevalent throughout, industries as well, where people feel like they don't want to be the old fuddy-duddy bank that's just offering boring old loans. They could be getting into this crypto thing, which they've been told is the future of finance.
Well, I am old enough to remember, and in fact, part of my political coming of age was the Great Recession and the greed of the banks and this high level of risky speculation and derivatives trading that also incorporated a very risky asset into parts of banking that created the amount of risk that resulted in the crash, right? And so this is my overall question is does this have the capacity to crash our economy? Maybe you can answer now, or if they get their way, or neither, or both.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, unfortunately, that there is a serious amount of risk here. I suspect with the current level of integration, even if crypto went through a collapse that we saw just a couple years ago, we would not see a Great Recession style contagion. But I think that the very rapidly progressing changes in regulation that the cryptocurrency industry has spent over $100 million on and is raising even more money to continue to pursue and seems to be getting very much raise that risk, and that type of contagion could be in the very near future, unfortunately, if these types of regulations are removed, or if favorable regulations are installed for the cryptocurrency industry. The more that we're seeing the US government endorsing crypto, I think the higher the risk is becoming. We're starting to see states talking about establishing Bitcoin reserves at the state level. And so, this is, actual people's money, taxpayer money, going towards acquiring Bitcoin, which, as you mentioned, is profiting those like the Winklevoss twins who bought Bitcoin very early on and are now billionaires. Again, at the expense of everyday people, while also introducing this degree of financial risk throughout the American economy, and honestly further, that could be devastating during a future collapse. So I am very concerned about the type of risk that we are rapidly taking on.
And then it's a good opportunity to talk about Andreessen Horowitz, and we covered it on our show. Mark Andreessen in November went on to the Joe Rogan podcast, which is the tech oligarch propaganda show, and he was or VC pick your poison. He was saying that Elizabeth Warren is personally debanking all of us and coming after us and targeting us politically. She does not head the CFPB. But Elon Musk is taking a hammer to the agency that has returned $21 billion to consumers who were victimized by corporate greed, and banking greed. And then he went on, and now he's basically claiming that his business in particular is being targeted, and you mentioned their holdings in crypto. What is this debanking thing all about, and why are billionaire crypto holders like Andreessen fixated on changing those regulations?
Yeah, so there has been this narrative coming out of the cryptocurrency industry that they are being systematically debanked by banking regulators and by agencies like the CFPB and by the Biden administration in general, through a campaign in which basically the administration and regulators were pressuring banks to deny banking services to anyone and any company in the cryptocurrency industry. And they've really sort of co-opted this term of debanking, which is, this idea where someone is improperly denied a bank account due to, their race, their religion, their economic status, any number of things, not based on their actual risk profile, but just because the bank decides they don't want to work with them for sort of discriminatory reasons. The crypto industry is claiming that they are being discriminated against and debanked in this same way, when in reality, most of the documents that they have provided that they claim show, hard evidence of this debanking campaign really show regulators trying to evaluate the risk of banks offering crypto products themselves. Like I said, the Bitcoin ATMs in the bank lobby and the crypto purchases in your banking app that sound like they're covered by FDIC insurance. There has been pretty little in the way of evidence that there is any sort of campaign to systematically debank the crypto industry. And in reality, it seems like banks basically doing their own risk assessments and saying this crypto company is too risky for us to take on as a customer. You're going to have to look elsewhere, which is a legal thing to do. Banks are not required to provide services to every customer. They just can't deny them for discriminatory reasons.
Well, they are discriminating against these corporate persons, according to the Supreme Court,
right,
based on the industry that they're in, which is the same as apparently racial discrimination.
Right. But anyway, this is all culminated in this campaign. It's been used as basically ammunition by the cryptocurrency industry to bolster this campaign to attack regulations on banks and other financial service providers. And it's ironically enough been used as ammunition to attack the CFPB, which is actually the number one defender against discriminatory debanking. They are sort of the primary consumer debanking watchdog. And yet, as the crypto industry is making all of these claims of debanking and even arguing about more general debanking against, they say it's happening against conservatives or other industries like the firearms industry or, religious organizations, even as they are making these claims about consumer debanking, they are celebrating the shutdown of the CFPB. Coinbase, for example, their CEO, Brian Armstrong, was, basically shooting off confetti cannons about the fact that the CFPB was being shut down, probably because the CFPB recently issued a sort of interpretive rule saying that Coinbase would have to make whole customers who are victims of basically phishing scams, stealing their cryptocurrency out of their Coinbase accounts, which a recent investigation by a cryptocurrency researcher called Zach XBT suggested was like $300 million a year that Coinbase was allowing to be stolen from its customers that they would have to repay. And so, it's very clear why someone like Brian Armstrong and Coinbase would be opposed to the CFPB, because they might install consumer protections for Coinbase customers who are historically ignored by Coinbase when they complain about stolen funds. And, it's inconvenient for them to support an agency that otherwise might be a very useful ally if they were concerned about debanking in the ways that they claim. But in reality, it's really just a political weapon to try to advance their goal of slashing regulations, reducing these firewalls between the banking industry and crypto, and, basically just allowing them to do whatever it is that they want. Consumers be damned.
And you write about the dubbing of it as Operation Choke Point 2.0. Can you explain what that means?
So that's a callback to a actual improper debanking, basically scandal that happened during the Obama administration. The true extent of it has been overblown somewhat, I think, but it is true that there was this effort through government pressure to discourage banks from providing services to a number of industries that they decided were high risk. And so that included firearms. It also included, payday lending and those types of
Great. Good job.
Yeah, right. Escort services and various other sort of industries that were deemed to be at high risk for money laundering and those types of things. And that was shut down. The FDIC retracted that and, apologized, and there was investigations and all sorts of things. The crypto industry is saying that what's happening right now is Operation Choke Point 2.0, that basically the Biden administration and Elizabeth Warren, I guess, revived this, controversial and improper campaign against an industry. Although there has been very little in the way of evidence suggesting that that is true.
And that, what are their goals, I guess, as we wrap here? Did they want to change the classification of their regulation? Is that part of what they're trying to do with this?
No, I mean, it really comes down to they want access to the banking system. They are, sort of categorizing a very broad range of things as debanking that are really not debanking. So, even though they describe it as being denied access to banking accounts, they're actually talking a lot of the time about these banking services that banks would be providing that would be closely integrating cryptocurrency into the banking system. And like I said, I think it's really just a weapon against the banking regulators to be used sort of in a very broad way to undermine them and to diminish the degree to which they can oversee banks.
Gotcha. Well, Molly White, really appreciate your time today. Your work on researching crypto, sometimes I have to read it a few times to fully get it because you're so technical and smart, but it really helps. And so I'd encourage everybody to go check out the Citation Needed newsletter. We'll put a link to that below down in the description wherever people are listening to or watching this. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, with that, folks, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program and head into the fun half, where we will take your calls and read your IMs, and we have some fun clips today. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning? You had an awesome episode yesterday.
Yeah, we released our Sunday show that was originally released on Sunday for members only, for everybody to watch, because we had Eric Blanc on talking about his new book, We Are the Union. I think we're going to have him on this program for that book as well. It's a very interesting look at the sort of state of union organizing right now. And that's the sort of theory. And as the practice, we had Edward and Ben on from the Philly Whole Foods Workers United union, who won 130 to 100, their union vote. And also they were listeners of this program and Left Reckoning and TMBS, which to me is basically confirmation that I don't know if you've seen this meme on TikTok of I'm looking for my audience.
Yeah.
That's who I do this stuff for, is people who work those jobs that stand up to their bosses. And so now I am one of the most annoyingly self-assured people in all of media. And I'm going to be really annoying on social media going forward. So check that out. And tonight, Jefferson Morley of jfkfacts.org, one of the best he had a really good talk with Vanity Fair about what to expect from the sort of JFK document releases. We have him tonight on Left Reckoning, talking about Bay of Pigs, talking about Operation Northwoods, all that sort of stuff, including the CIA lies about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Did you see what I DM'd you maybe weeks ago about? It was Bush talking about Kennedy. It was H.W. Bush talking about Kennedy and I forget who it was for. It was a funeral service, and he starts smiling, talking about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah,
he starts basically stifling a laugh as he looks to somebody in the audience.
George H.W. Bush, who was a personal contact with a guy named George de Mohrenschildt, who was Lee Harvey Oswald's best friend in Dallas.
Coincidences abound. I'm going to be very excited to check out that Jefferson Morley interview.
George de Mohrenschildt, also a longtime sort of aristocrat, spy, oil related person. So it's just interesting the type of friends somebody like Lee Harvey Oswald might make, and who might hook him up with jobs at the Dallas Book Depository. just interesting that that guy would later call George H.W. Bush saying, hey, I'm receiving a lot of questions. Can I get some guidance on what to do about this? And
someone points out it was Gerald Ford's funeral. Yeah, it was like it wasn't Kennedy's or like Ted Kennedy's. To bring it up out of nowhere seemed like a very interesting choice.
Where was he on the day Kennedy was killed? Can he be clear about that? He's somebody who kind of can't. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It would be funny, and it truly would be the best thing Donald Trump did as president if his feud with the Bushes resulted in him releasing some of that classified information to the public. That's where he could actually be useful for the first time in his life. Anyway, as I mentioned, ESPN were on a bit of a hiatus, but because we've been talking about, and we will in the fun half talk more about the just horrific effects on the federal workforce. Tomorrow, if you would like to, Bradley, we can pull this up. We did from yesterday, that day of action. There's a clip that Dorsey clipped yesterday, I saw. So that has the information there. But if you want to basically stand with federal workers, there are a bunch of actions across the United States saying no to Elon Musk's push to gut federal services and impose mass layoffs. February 19th, you can go to the website, Save Our Services Day of Action. We'll put a link to that below. Also coming up, we're going to try to do more of this just to give people opportunities to resist and protest and find some community in these dark times. There is, I think, an economic blackout planned for next Friday, the 28th. So this is 10 days away. We'll be informing people about this. But in protest of these actions, I think a lot of people are encouraged to limit the usage of services if they have the capacity to do so. So I'm giving everybody 10 days notice to start to plan and think about that. We'll have more details about that in the future. So boycotts, not the only way that, or limiting, consumption, not really the best way probably to protest as like to change the world. But as we're trying to just find little ways to put pressure on this administration, Trump cares about stock market go up or stock market go down. So if people show their protest this way, it could have some sort of effect.
We need to most acutely destroy Elon's company. So anytime you see somebody driving a Tesla, particularly a Cybertruck, let them hear about it. Don't get into a fight or whatever.
Don't get into a fight, but there have been people who have been putting sell your Tesla little flyers under the windshields of these things.
I saw there's a plastic surgeon up in Worcester who is like, everyone is giving me bad. He has a gold Cybertruck, I think.
Oh, sounds like he's great.
He's like, why, everyone should just accept different opinions. No, you shouldn't have bought that thing, you idiot.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. I hate seeing those damn Cybertrucks all around. I literally think it's going to impale somebody.
They already kill people.
They are. It is more dangerous than the Ford Pinto. More dangerous than the Ford Pinto, which had its fuel truck in the trunk, in the back of the car. Like, what are we doing here? By the way, this is what government regulations are for.
And it's really that's Elon's not so much taking money out of the treasury as like Joe Rogan says. He's destroying all the referees. It's like if 2019 James Harden all of a sudden got in charge of the referees organization, said, I'm firing a bunch of y'all.
And putting in my family members.
Exactly. and then all of a sudden he wins the MVP award the next 3 years in the finals. Right. That's what's happening.
Except higher stakes. Higher stakes.
Well, that's debatable.
All right, guys. We'll take your phone calls in the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. See you there.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please. No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi and poker.
Tim's upset.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Was offered a tour. Sushi and
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour.
Wow.
Sushi.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind.
Was offered a tour.
Yeah.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
Had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour.
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's
A tour.
a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's
Poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
real thing. That's
Poker with the boys. That offered a tour.
That's a real thing. That's
Poker.
Let's go, Joey.
Tour. Sushi and poker with the boys.
Take it easy, Glenn.
Tour. Sushi and poker.
Things have really gotten out of hand.
Sushi and poker with the boys.
Delusional.
Tour.
Deluded.
Sushi.
You don't have a clue as to what's going on. Live YouTube.
Sam has like the weight of the world on his shoulders.
Pogger.
Sam doesn't want to do this show anymore.
Do it anymore.
It was so much easier when the Majority Report was just you. You were happy.
Let's change the subject.
Right.
Rangers and Knicks are doing great.
Now, shut up. You don't want people saying reckless things on your program.
That's
Now,
one of the most difficult parts about this show.
This is a pro-killing podcast.
I'm thinking maybe it's time we bury the hatchet.
Left is best. Violet.
Tour.
Don't be foolish and don't fucking tweet at me and don't binge. The way Emma has cucked all of these people, love it.
That's where my heart is. So I wrote my honors thesis about it.
Oh,
Sorry,
she
finance.
wrote an honest thesis. I guess I should hand the main mic to you now.
You are to the right of me on foreign policy.
We already fund Israel, dude. Are you against that?
That's a tougher question I don't have an answer to.
Incredible theme song.
Hi, Bumbler.
Emma Vigeland, absolutely one of my favorite people. Actually, not just in the game, like period.
We are back, folks. Apple Cideritis says, as far as passive-aggressive confrontation with Cybertruck drivers, often the thumbs down is more hurtful than the middle finger.
I like literally think about, and I can't do it because like obviously you don't want to do Nazi salutes in public, but they deserve to be ironically saluted at.
Oh yes, yes, or at the very least, go up to them. You can go up to them and say like, "Hey, man, you know, I really, really appreciate you standing with Elon Musk and you know the reassertion of the white race in America," or something. CPG Matt working to say Worcester as if Sam would manifest from the shadows if he got it wrong was truly fantastic.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. What'd you try to say?
I said Worcester.
Worcester. NB laborer patiently awaiting the Sam Bankman-Fried was too soon articles. Yeah, I mean they learned nothing from that. They did the bad egg and off with them.
He was a Democrat.
Travis from Hartford, during the Kamala campaign, whenever someone would text me asking to vote, I'd always mention cozying up to crypto. I'd get canned messages excluding her standing by genocide, but when I press about crypto, it was silence. Interesting.
That's funny. I heard that they took people off the list when they mentioned Gaza.
I saw that online too, yeah.
Just another way they decided, made a conscious choice to demobilize their base ahead of what I think we can all recognize was a rather important election.
Yes,
to
pretty
support
important.
Israel and crypto.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this dynamic so many times in different contexts about the Republicans embrace their base and what they want, and the Democrats say no, 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 whether it's from Bernie Sanders or just ending a genocide. They feel like they have there's no consequences because they can always
when they do it. Like 2020, they kneeled in kente cloths. They benefited from the George Floyd protests. They did. And that's because they co-opted it, frankly. Yeah. And I think it's good to have them win over Republicans. They also co-opted it in like 2008. A lot of the anti-war sentiment, like they can do it. It's just like sometimes they decide not to, and that is catastrophic for democracy.
It's crazy because I really do think that the specific kind of Democrat right now in Washington and the consultant ethos there, it's such a specific kind of brain rot that we don't see fully embraced by the governors in this country who were floated as potential 2024 replacements for Biden, even though it was really not possible once he chose to run again and technically won the primary. But they're more like Walz had that quote about how you accumulate political capital to burn it. And he did that in Minnesota. And you see it with Whitmer and you see it with Pritzker. And they're actually interested in governing and wielding power. And with the exception of AOC in Washington, I really don't see a 2028 frontrunner that can come out of our Washington establishment and meet the moment that we need. So I'm on the governor train or AOC because everybody else, they're just institutionalists.
The truth is I think what needs to happen, and one sort of cause for optimism is this labor action we're planning for that, and that's not the majority report, like Sean Fain and the teachers union and those folks are looking at for 2028. Because the truth is, FDR, which is what we need another New Deal to basically build anew for the next century. FDR didn't win promising a New Deal. He was promising things like balanced budgets and stuff like that. But the organization was such that there was no other ideas left over other than to massively expand the government to make up for suppressed demand because capitalism had finally died. We're in a similar situation now where when Biden came into office, he's talking about $2 trillion Build Back Better, which is ultimately winged. He's talking about the PRO Act. He's talking about $15 minimum wage because and not because like there's something essential about Joe Biden that one of those things, because there's nothing else.
Yeah.
There's really nothing else. And what we saw is them trying to run a campaign on the nothing else. Like we're going to do tax credits and we're going to not give you Medicare for all, but certain diseases that may affect you if you're certain identity groups. You might have some benefit in 10 years because of the research. Like that stuff doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Ostentatious says 100%. I'm thinking it might be Pritzker. Jody from Chicago said, hear me out, Pritzker, AOC 2028. I texted that to Sam, I think, and he scolded me and said, stop thinking about 2028 this far out. But
because I don't trust any of the individuals I hear about. Whitmer, sorry. I'm not enthused about that. I'm not enthused about, well, obviously not Shapiro. Even Bashir, like, to me, it's the context around them.
Of course.
Pritzker, I think, does have but trader possibility though.
Okay, but can we just have some fun with it for a sec, because it's the only way I feel like I have a sense of control. Pritzker AOC could be interesting, and if he does the FDR thing or whatever, like the billionaire that doesn't give a crap, and then she's the lieutenant, and we have a AMLO Scheinbaum situation.
Well, remember FDR got rid of Wallace, so that I think.
Oh, he did get rid of Wallace. Yeah, but that was I mean, God, what was that, his third term?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pritzker's third term. I also want AOC as a senator.
Me too. And I think she's going to go for 2028 Schumer seat.
Yeah, that would be a massive upgrade.
Which would be huge, but like I think she could really. She is probably not arrogant enough to say, I want to run for president in 2028. I think she's just a little bit more measured. But people are underestimating how well she could do in a primary. For like any woman under the age of 40, who's voting Democrat in a Democratic primary, you don't think she'd have an immediately very high floor? She's like a feminist icon for every woman I know. They would be voting for her. I really think that. And that will give her an immediate leg up as somebody who still is not New York DSA, but nationally endorsed as a DSA candidate. So I hope she considers it, because also there's an issue with my gain again. So we just got to fix this, because I'm always way too hot. IMers, yes. And I don't know why I'm always louder than everybody. Okay. Thank you, Jennifer from St. Louis, for pointing it out. All right, opening up the phone lines, 646-257-3920. Kowalski from Nebraska. The safety of the Ford Pinto was exaggerated extensively. It was more or less a victim of the media environment of its day. Unlike the Tesla, the Ford Pinto was actually made in large numbers, like over 10 million, and there were very few issues with the automobile itself during testing that passed union scrutiny. Back in the day, the Ford Pinto getting rear-ended by anything aside from a dump truck wouldn't necessarily cause it to catch fire. But today, our SUV pickup vehicle arms race of 4-ton monsters, a Tesla getting rear-ended, does have a chance of detonating a battery that would take 30,000 gallons of water to put out. Poof.
I mean, pedestrian deaths caused by drivers have been going up in this country for a long time. And it's because we've, decided every community needs to be a strip mall type wasteland.
Right. The circus in town says, good to see Emma back in the prediction game. That was no prediction. It was just wishful thinking.
With AOC, I've always thought a little bit too regional in her appeal, but I do think the last election where she outperformed Kamala by significant with particularly working class folks, I think the folks that and like Latinos and stuff that Democrats have lost because they have destroyed the candidate that could appeal to those people, like Bernie Sanders, Nevada. Remember that? Yeah. I think she does. I think she's probably stronger than anybody in the left wing of Congress, certainly.
Yes. Well, now that we're on the topic of AOC, I did open up the phone lines, but let's do this, because Matt just mentioned that, I guess it was last week at this point, AOC did a webinar informing people in her district and broadly of their rights if ICE comes knocking and tries to deport one of their family members or friends. And this caused a mass freakout on right-wing media. It's time, once again, for them to breathe new life into their psychosexual fixation with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And who better to do it than this, I don't know, this Harkonnen over
Obama
here.
appointee?
Yeah, the least articulate thumb in the world, who just basically decided that he wasn't going to leave Midtown Manhattan yesterday, and he went on Newsmax and 6 different, I'm barely exaggerating, I think it was 4 different Fox News shows to talk about AOC. So here is Homan earlier in the day on with Bill Hemmer, who almost seems exasperated with him. He's the border czar, Homan. Not sure what authority he really has, except to just be a fascist in public for Donald Trump.
Heard you talking about AOC over the weekend. Do you believe she is breaking the law?
I'll leave that up to DOJ. What I find disturbing is that any member of Congress wants to educate people how they evade law enforcement. You can claim you're educating those constitutional rights. Okay, you can keep that claim. What she in fact is doing is telling people don't open your door, hide in your home, don't talk to ICE. We're talking about people who are in the country illegally, committed a crime, they're a public safety threat, they've been convicted of serious crime, and they've been ordered removed by a federal judge. So it's like AOC and others don't want ICE to enforce the laws that they enacted. She's a member of Congress. Let us enforce the laws you enacted. That's what we're supposed to do.
You can't go after her. Do you think others should?
Crazy question.
No, I think I've asked DOJ, where is that line of impediment, of interference? Now, if someone stands in your way, prevents you from arresting somebody, put your hands on you, that's impediment.
What?
But what line is telling people to hide from ICE, not open the door? Where do you cross that line on impediment? So I've simply asked the Department of Justice, give us that line.
You have talked to them about this. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow. We'll see where that goes. Tom Homan, I'm out of time.
Wow. So this is him saying essentially that he is directing the Department of Justice to look in one of Donald Trump's political enemies because AOC dared to have a webinar where she just explicitly delineated people's Fourth Amendment rights that prevents unreasonable search and seizure. I want to make sure that I have the exact wording correct. Yes, the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So that does require specificity about the warrant. Now, the Supreme Court has eroded this right over and over again. But you can, I mean, as the Trump administration flagrantly violates the law when there are judges telling, say, like Elon Musk, that he has no right to access this Treasury Department's most private information, and they're just doing it anyway. Now Holman is going to go on TV and say that he's directing an investigation by the Justice Department that's now currently extorting the mayor of New York City to enforce their immigration policies and raids. He's saying, well, because this congresswoman from the same city isn't abiding by what we want, well, we'll drop prosecution in one instance because we can force the guy to do what we want. But in the instance where this congresswoman is not abiding by what we want, yeah, we're going to try to prosecute her. That's basically what he's saying. I mean, the administration fully hasn't said it, but he's the border czar. He's a representative of the administration. He was on CNN saying the same thing. Here he is on Newsmax, you know, with his opinions about her intelligence. It's so weird.
This guy?
How this guy
who sounds like a bulldog that's been like inbred for 30 generations trying to breathe. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. This Rhodes Scholar says
he does look like he's wasting away, which is, you know, something we can all celebrate.
Yes. I mean, that would be nice. I would like to see that happen, maybe on air, live. Of course, he's calling her dumb here. That's what you do when you got to put down a strong woman.
Well, first of all, I think she's, you know, I won't go after her on
Tom, please do. Say what's on your mind. It's a holiday.
Look, she's the dumbest congresswoman ever elected to the Congress, and she proves that every day. And
You're
look,
slurring your words.
I can't believe any member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, Independent, would want to educate criminal illegal aliens who are in the country illegally, been convicted of a violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after due process.
That's always a tell when they have to lean on the been convicted of a violent crime thing, because that's not, we know that's not who they're going after. They think, this Nazi here thinks that being in this country undocumented is the violent crime. It's violence against whiteness.
Right.
And the Fox News, like he says, Hammer said, do you have anybody else going after her? That is a very dangerous thing to say in this country when Congress people have been shot up by the right wing on that. And
Gabby Giffords was shot by a right winger. What was that, 10 years ago?
Exactly. And here's something for all the Nazis who think like this Homan guy has something to say. Undocumented people have rights, you stupid assholes. They have rights.
Yes. They do. And to bolster Matt's, well, let's finish what he has to say, and then I want to bolster Matt's point about who's actually being detained right now by ICE.
Violent crime, and have been ordered removed by an immigration judge after due process at great taxpayer expense. You got a congressman or congresswoman that does not want ICE to do the job that Congress has mandated them to do and funds them to do.
I cannot believe that this person has such little self-awareness that he just called her dumb. I mean, I can barely understand what you know, Humpty Dumpty is saying here. But
it's called Radical by Mao.
This came out on Friday. This is actually a great. This is some of the folks over on Substack are doing really good work on immigration, because a lot of our mainstream media is not touching this, and they're just regurgitating the criminal talking point that Matt just alluded to. So ICE is, according to Austin Coker on Substack, ICE's latest detention data shows growth of immigrants targeted with no criminal histories, exactly as predicted.
Who could have saw that coming?
Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, released new detention data today that objectively confirms widespread reports that ICE's enforcement surge has largely targeted immigrants without criminal convictions or criminal charges, contrary to the Trump administration's baseless public assertions. The data is clear on this point, and then Coker explains. ICE's detention data reflects the total detained population on a single day. It does not reflect the total number of people detained and released, blah, blah, blah. So they're just giving some background about the data. But you can see in this chart here the number of people detained by ICE, and you can see that escalation. As of February 9th, ICE's total detained population reached 41,169. ICE's total detained population is now higher than at any point in the Biden administration. And for the first time since the pandemic, those numbers have crossed 40,000.
It's interesting that CBP's numbers haven't gone up. It seems like ICE is more responsive to the incoming fascists than CBP.
Yes. This growth is due entirely to the people detained by ICE rather than by Customs and Border Patrol protection. So you can see like the border CBP would be at the border. This is basically about the raids.
Right.
The number of people booked in by CBP declined by 2,491, while the number booked in by ICE increased 4,422. It was the largest single bi-weekly increase in people detained by ICE since at early 2021, again in the pandemic. So that clearly indicates to you that despite them talking about their fears at the border, the number of detentions is declining there because they are reallocating their resources to raids of folks and terrorizing people. And then here it is with the criminal history. This is the chart that they tabulated. Immigrants with criminal convictions made up the largest group of people in detention at the start of the Trump administration, in no small part due to the laws around how ICE is required to detain, as well as the priorities of the Biden administration. That was a continuation of the of the Obama policy, which was deportations targeted towards people with criminal histories. That's what the Trump administration is claiming they're doing, but they're lying. The number of those individuals did go up from about 9,300 to about 10,500. The total number of people detained with pending criminal charges also increased. But the largest objective growth in people detained came from immigrants with no other criminal histories. This group increased by almost 2,000 in about 2 weeks. This group also grew proportionally from 6% to 14% of people all detained. And then I just want to get to the chart below, the bar graph. Here it is. Relative growth of detained immigrants by criminal history. Other immigration violators, 3.2 times growth of the others in the Trump administration.
And the convicted criminal thing can only grow so much because that's already been a point of emphasis for over a decade by all administrations.
By both Biden and Obama, and of course Trump. So you can see that the growth of the people who don't have either convictions or pending criminal charges is multiple times more than that of those with records or with convictions. So there you have it, folks.
And so if somebody said, for instance, that his main complaint, sorry to get into this, but there's commentators that I think should issue corrections on some of their statements. Cenk Uygur, January 27, said, the Colombian president started the fight on accepting undocumented immigrants back into his country. His main complaint was that they were coming on a military plane, and that's inhumane treatment. Good news, you can treat them as humanely as you like when you have them back. Did Trump threatening sanctions work?
Put that up. I want to read this.
Yeah, I'll put this in. I'll put it in Slack right
here. I
here.
hadn't seen this, so.
This is the last time I respond to this, which is, I think, a heinous tweet, frankly, disgusting at the time. Did Trump threatening sanctions work to resolve this? Yes, that's a fact. Was there much substance to the original complaint? To be honest, no. I think the real substantive fight is over who to deport. If they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. Now, everyone that had been following this knew that, not to grant the premise, that if they're convicted felons, their comfort on the plane is not my top concern. It is insanely it is insanely discrediting that he even thought to tweet that out, because everyone knows that the rise is going to be in people who aren't. And now we have people like in Costa Rica and all these countries taking people like, say, one story I think we saw in the news back today of a woman who was seen through a window being held at a hotel. And she held up a sign that says Afghanistan. And then she held up her hands to say, to make a plane symbol, and then mimicked her head getting cut off, saying that if I get sent back to Afghanistan, I will be killed. That is happening all over because of this. And these people are not criminals.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I hadn't seen this particular tweet. It's hard to see anything on Twitter these days. But so the Colombian president basically had, at this time, rejected the usage of military planes that the Trump administration was trying to use to deport undocumented people back to Colombia because of the extreme history of U.S. military intervention in Latin America and what that would mean, and the fact that he didn't like that they were being treated as criminals when they were essentially just trying to come to the United States to make a better life for themselves. And the Trump administration, didn't they basically capitulate on that? I forget exactly the details.
They eventually forced them to take the planes because they were much more powerful than Colombia is.
But
with that too is it's sort of they interpreted that as if it was a victory when really they just kind of did what Petro asked them to do, which is officialize it by have the migrants on the military planes,
right?
And said it was just a victory because they threatened Petro with tariffs. Therefore, he said, okay, do it on the military planes, even though that's what usually how they would get those migrants there in the first place, which is on military planes as opposed to a chartered flight or something like that.
Right. And the second part that Matt read here about the top concern being people's comfort. Why is the top concern them not having comfort? I mean, this is the odd thing, it's
pandering.
Well, no, I mean, actually, I used to be, again, when I got hired there, I was a huge fan of their show for a while. And I remember back in the day, they did a segment about Anders Breivik, the killer in
Norwegian
Norway.
mass shooter?
Or stabber, right? Or he was a...
No, Breivik set off a bomb in Oslo, I think, right? Or maybe it was Sorry, I'm getting
I can't remember, but he was a mass killer, horrific human being.
That went up and shot like a young labor sort of camp after he set up a bomb in one of the major cities in
it was a bombing and a shooting. Yeah,
and,
right.
And I remember he was... they showed basically the conditions of the jail that he is in, where he will be in for the rest of his life, but the court system there, you just have to renew it over and over again, so there's no life sentence. But he will be there for the rest of his life. And the fact that he had a TV and it looked like a dorm, as they do all across many prisons in Scandinavia, I remember Cenk was very unhappy with that. So I don't necessarily know if this is pandering. I do think it's just a difference in ideology where I do not believe that carceral punishment is an effective way to make us safer for the most part. If there are dangerous criminals like Breivik, as long as they are kept away from the rest of society so they don't commit mass atrocities, I do not believe that they should be held in inhumane conditions. We know that solitary confinement is regularly used against prisoners like, say, Chelsea Manning or other people who may, God forbid, read a magazine, which literally really drives people insane and has no positive effect on society. That's what our prison system is like. It's a system of abuse as opposed to one that is oriented towards rehabilitation. So my point here is that I don't actually think it's pandering. I do think it's a difference in ideology where one, he's pandering by granting the premise that these are criminals, which we just showed the data that they're obviously not. But it's a difference in between, a more right-wing reactionary viewpoint, which is what that show is now, and one that's based in humanism and about creating structures that aren't about inflicting pain really on anybody, but about keeping us all safe.
Yeah, because Emma, quick questions. Do you know where MS-13 came from?
It is a gang from...
U.S. prison system.
Oh,
do you know where Tren de Aragua came from?
U.S. prison system?
Venezuelan prison system. It turns out that just caging people in mass doesn't actually solve the problems that some of the same people like to think are the most important and urgently addressed. It turns out that prison might actually be a networking opportunity for criminals.
Yes, I think that's kind of well established, but people pretend not to care because they like the punishment aspect.
Exactly. And also there's, an audience ready for sort of pro-mass crime stuff, which we've witnessed even before in so-called independent media, investor-taking media. And the mass media, they love to lead with these sorts of stories.
Well, let's take a call, and then I wanted to do this federal worker story, which is really important, but I've had some folks on the line for a second. Calling from a 585 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is this me?
This is you.
Hi, this is Brandon from Rochester. I called in before, I think, and at the time you suggested, or I wanted to debate Sam before, and you said you could take down my number to greenlight that. I'd probably call back in later the week if you're still open for that.
He's not here this whole week, but you can call in next week if you want to debate him in particular.
Sure. Yeah, I'll probably do that.
All right.
Sure. And besides that, the only thing that I knew that I don't know if you guys heard, I don't think I heard you read him today, but ExpressVPN is unfortunately owned by Cape Technologies, which is a technology firm owned by Teddy Sagi, who's an Israeli billionaire who made most of his money by founding a gambling software support company. So,
okay.
Unfortunately, he owns shit tons of stuff. I didn't know it, but my VPN, who's a different provider, which I thought was decent, is also owned by him. So he owns loads of shit.
Okay, well, we're writing that down now, and we'll make sure to flag it. Thanks for letting us know.
Yep, cool.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, generally when it comes to that stuff, it's less about the nationality of the people than if they're on explicitly the BDS boycott list.
Yeah. To be honest, that's kind of the guide that we use, but this is a little above my pay grade, but we did write it down.
Or if they're, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure actually the West Bank making company, the West Bank linen company was actually on the BDS list.
Yes, that's why we said no to them. Ryan and Callie, Anders Breivik's cell is better than my apartment, but as long as he's unable to murder her children, I'm okay with that. Right, exactly. Dave from Jamaica, I'll be honest, Jank, like a lot of people, confuses toughness with effectiveness. Portland Pete, also someone being a convicted felon doesn't mean it's okay to treat them poorly. Democrats get way too excited about making bad people suffer. It's wrong.
Oh yeah, remember how people thought the calling Trump a convicted felon thing was going to work? Did that work?
Yeah, it didn't work great.
Didn't do nothing.
Jerry at the beach, this Tom Homan guy looked like he shit on the television today, slurring his words, bald head, looking extremely thumb-like, very, very disrespectful. Company Townie, it's wild to call AOC the dumbest person in Congress when Boebert and MTG exist. Yeah.
Looks like Droopy Dog.
He does. He does look like that. Teacher Dan 20, my grandfather had a cleft palate in his face. His upper lip looked a lot like that, even worse, and his voice sounded a little like that, even worse. I have no doubt this guy is an asshole, but don't pick on the way he talks.
Homan have a cleft palate? I don't notice that.
Beg to differ. Yeah. I'm sorry. This was the same thing. Like RFK, I understand. Junior, I know he has an affliction, but you cross a certain level of being a bad person, I'm gonna make fun of you about everything.
Yeah.
Sorry. Obvious books. Obama was the first to appoint Tom Homan and even awarded him a citation. I remember. Yeah. Al Sonic from Pittsburgh. I want to warn that Zuckerberg may run for president. He explored this in 2017. He went to a farm in Iowa. He's obsessed with the Roman Emperor Augustus. Is that why he had that haircut before? He's truly scary. A friend of his has stated he wants to be an emperor of the world. I guarantee he gets divorced and runs as a Republican. He definitely seems like he's getting divorced, but he's like arguably more uncharismatic than Elon Musk.
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, Zuckerberg is not going to be be the nominee for president. DSA Aaron in Atlanta, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are even better than AOC, but they are more brown, so it could never happen. Well, also, Rashida Tlaib could run, but Ilhan Omar was not born in the United States, so she can't run for president.
Indiana voted for Barack Obama. Like, I think people need to stop overemphasizing things like women can't win or brown people can't win in this country. I think it's somewhat self-defeating.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say women can't win, but I would say that I think it's important to recognize how more limited many women in a traditional political context may feel expressing themselves, and how there may be reflexive reactions to them that are still deeply ingrained. I mean, as Sam says, when he was a kid, his mom couldn't get a credit card in his name. It's not a shock that there are some people who can't reflexively see a woman in an authority position, but it does, I think, depend on the campaign. Like, if AOC were to run on a campaign that will change people's lives, she's going to face an incredible amount of sexism, as she does, as we just played with Tom Homan. But can that transcend that? I mean, that is an open question to me.
I think in order to be a first, you need to actually have some offering people something. I think Obama offered something. I think the two women who have been at the top of the ticket were maybe two of the worst politicians in my lifetime, and they shouldn't have been. And it was a failing of the party to elevate them into.
But Biden was a horrible politician, and he beat Donald Trump.
But Biden was running on stuff. Biden ran on a public option. Like,
he said he would veto Medicare for all.
That's true,
race.
But he ran on a public option.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Build Back Better, $1 trillion thing, PRO Act, like all this stuff was de-emphasized. And also, you know, I think.
But the nature of the attack is so different. Like, I mean, Biden gets this inherent baked-in credibility when I don't know if Hillary Clinton's campaign was that dissimilar from his. I mean, Kamala's was more conservative. I would agree with that. But she incorporated some of Sanders's policies into her platform, and like
Clinton ran saying, "Don't look into my speeches to Goldman Sachs." Like, I think she couldn't have been worse for that moment.
Biden ran and said, "What, like with the immigration stuff? What, you know, go to Trump, he'll deport you." Like, we could come up with a million different examples, but I just think it. You know what? Our audience is 82% male, right? I just saw this statistic the other day. If you're a woman watching this show, right? I think that there's probably, you know, some that you probably understand a little bit about how you have to essentially tailor your speech to fit into certain boxes. It may not necessarily be the case, but that is how American politics functions, in that you can't be too aggressive or you're seen as a bitch. You can't be too emotional or you're seen as unfit to lead. And there's very little room to navigate in the middle of that. And I think both Harris and Clinton were hampered by it. But Hillary had more baggage, and Kamala's campaign was more uninspired. I don't know.
I think that's, again, like, I think you do need to be, in order to be a first and break one of these barriers, you do need to be an exemplary candidate. But I also, like, can't help on this topic remembering that Bernie Sanders was smeared in 2020 as a sexist for allegedly having a similar sort of concern. That, I will say, you can go back, I thought was overblown if that was sincere concern of his at the time. But I agree that we should be able to have these conversations, but I think the way that they're deployed is dangerous, because it wasn't, we need to take this seriously when Bernie was supposedly saying it to Elizabeth Warren, it was, look at that sexist. But
the way that it's deployed on the internet is different than how normal people are engaging with it, which I think, you know.
I mean, by the party, though.
By the party, they're going to use it all as an excuse. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we can't, at the same time, talk about the, like, undergirding reactionary moment of, like, sexism and misogyny that we're in right now, which I do think is informing a lot of the politics, as it did with the rise of the Nazis, when it was a third of the population was unemployed, and Hitler and the Nazis talked about this renewed sense of masculinity, which gave these men purpose, and then also gave them benefits to keep the women in the home so they could produce Aryan children. This is not a new thing. And in a country like ours, you know, when we see women leaders across the West get elected, with Scheinbaum being a notable exception, they're either conservatives or they're centrists. what's the leftist female leader in the West that has gotten elected under a patriarchal, like, Christian society? I mean, it's very rare. We have such a dearth of female senators too. So there is, and I can say from personal experience, a harder time sometimes getting your perspective taken seriously as a woman, where it's seen as, like, when they would say about Kamala, she has no details. I mean, she didn't have a vision, but she had way more details than Donald Trump. Trump came out there and said they're eating cats and dogs. And I mean, and, you know, I just want to make sure that, and with the Bernie thing, Bernie, of course, wasn't a sexist, but there was sometimes, like, there's a style, there's a militancy and an uncompromising nature, which is a good thing in any leftist political movement, but that can sometimes feel a little bit like women don't understand necessarily what their place is in that movement. And I'm still struggling to try to find a way to, like, I don't know, make that a part of my coverage in a way that also doesn't validate the bad faith concerns that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, does this impact your AOC 2028 stuff? Because it doesn't for me. If she wins the primary, I'm willing to go to bat for that.
I think she could win based on what we're saying, because she could have an agenda that's transformative, and then, you know, the issues that we're talking about matter less. But I also, you know, I don't want to belittle it, because I do think it's a real thing, and, you know, particularly reflective of, like, I don't know, some things that I think the left could work on, being more inclusive in that way. Dave from Upstate says, Emma, did you ever consider you lack a mission? I did not consider that. DSA Aaron in Atlanta said there were Bernie bros that were sexist, but Bernie wasn't. Exactly right. I mean, but there were going to be sexists in all, like, Biden was sexist and racist in the way that he put Kamala in the corner and didn't actually groom her to be his successor. He used her as a prop and then moved on with his life. These are just very insidious things that are, it's, as Sam would say, it's harder sometimes to identify misogyny than it is racism. Morpheus says, have you guys seen RFK saying that SSRIs are harder to quit than heroin and leads to violence in children, as if his positions on vaccines weren't awful enough? Going after antidepressants is increasingly dangerous, especially when considering the precarious state of our mental health care infrastructure. Yikes. I mean, this is the quackery that, do you remember when Tom Cruise was obsessed with this via Scientology? That's when he got into that fight with Matt Lauer. This has been anti-SSRIs has been a part of, like, crank culty weird fixations for decades now. But yeah, it's being formalized with RFK. Jody from Chicago. More importantly, who do you think the DNC wants to be the nominee in 2028? Mr. Corporate Tax Cuts, right? Yes, Josh Shapiro.
Which is why I think people need to focus on organizing both as tenants and workers, because this party's, I think, toast.
Matt, I guess, says, not a female viewer, but I agree with Emma on this one. There is not an insignificant amount of voters who will be very reluctant to vote for a woman or person of color, and another that will be motivated to vote against them. It can be overcome, but they have to account for it. I think that's my point, too. It can definitely be overcome with the right candidate.
Because both those elections were close.
Right. 100%. It can be overcome with the right candidate, and to Matt's point, too, by party leadership, it is often used as it's a both classist and, like, coastal minimization of, like, states in the middle of the country that they can just never accept somebody. As Matt says, they did vote for Obama. That's a man. It's a bit of a different situation. But
I think I just would say, like, I think Bernie supporters are the best thing in the Democratic coalition. And there's a lot of different pathologies that are exhibited throughout different types of voting blocks. And I think it's very suspicious that in 2016 and 2020, ahead of Iowa, it was Bernie is sexist. And also Bernie bros, I think, was as, like, I think that's elites looking at the mob saying we need to discipline those people. And I think it's being just dressed up in different language.
Yeah, I think from how that was deployed by them, that's definitely accurate. Wallace and Gromit fan 247 thoughts about potential Tim Walz 2028 run. His track record of actually using power in a partisan way when Democrats took control of the Minnesota legislature by the slimmest of margins is exactly what would have translated at the national level. If no other viable progressives run, he may be the strongest contender for the left. Plus, if he were to become the nominee, imagine how Shapiro would feel. I think he's going to be, unfortunately, a little too tainted by that last campaign.
I agree. I think they blew his political. I think it's funny, the guy in a rush to blow his political capital got it,
I know,
stolen and blown by a campaign that didn't even really reflect him.
I know. It's a shame because he really is. He's one of our better Democrats. All right, let's do. Okay, this is what I wanted to do, the federal workers thing. Yeah, Bradley, the right. If you could just pull up that, and then also the Kyle Cheney tweet. So there were letters that were sent to a bunch of federal employees to notify them that they have been fired from different agencies. And these letters from Elon Musk and Trump and Doge essentially cite poor work performance as a reason for termination in many of these firings. And that's basically targeting this classification of workers in the federal workforce that go as probationary workers. Now, they're not on probation. They're not doing anything wrong. It just is like a classification in the federal government that involves the amount of time that you've been working there. And sometimes if you move from different agencies, you will be classified as probationary. So you have probationary status typically if you are somebody who's worked for the federal government for less than 2 years before you move to a more protected status where you receive full civil service protections. But you can also be probationary temporarily, which has happened on occasion with some of these fired workers, if you're moving in between agencies. So these are the folks who are being targeted right now by these cuts by Elon Musk. And at things like the FAA and the Department of Transportation, some of these employees are being told that they're being fired for poor performance. But the managers are leaking to the press. No. Most of these employees have been shown, and we have it documented based on their performance reviews, as being essentially exceptional performers by their superiors. But this is something that Elon Musk did with the Twitter layoffs, which is that he wants to fire them for poor performance so the federal government doesn't have to pay their full benefits. And that offer for severance or whatever is also a scam because it doesn't essentially guarantee the full payout, if I'm not mistaken, Bradley. Right? That's the case with some of those severance packages. It's a little bit unclear. We don't need to look it up right now, but just putting that caveat in. And the reality is that these are real people, millions of federal workers who, many of whom who have dedicated their lives to making this world a better place. Sam interviewed that NLRB person who said it was her life's dream. She got her master's in this particular field, invested, and could be subjected to the whims of a billionaire who doesn't like the fact that we have labor protections in this country. But these are some of the stories. If you could just scroll down, Bradley, to the bottom where it says above fully successful, that part. And I just want to credit the Washington Post, in particular my buddy Jeff Stein, who has really been, I guess this isn't Jeff, but another Washington Post piece. This is by Hannah Natanson, Lisa Ryan, and Emily Davies. But Jeff's been doing great work as well.
Yeah, the colleagues of Jeff.
Colleagues of Jeff. Sorry to Jeff, you can get credit too. So they're publishing here some of the stories of the people that have been fired. And I just wanted to read this to people because, again, they're real human beings. One transportation department worker found out he was fired on Valentine's Day just after putting his children to bed as he sat down to watch a movie with his wife. An agriculture employee discovered he was terminated the morning after attending an ex-partner's funeral. A Natural Resource Conservation Service employee was cut months after the government paid $20,000 to relocate his family to North Dakota. Others targeted in the wave of firings fixated on the emails explaining why, struggling to understand. Employees who were told their performance was at issue said they had earned evaluations reviewed by the Post that offered evidence of their good work. Above fully successful, read a November assessment of a Fire General Services Administration worker. An outstanding year, consistently exceeding expectations, stated the review for a former NIH employee whose manager credited her for mastering a steep learning curve and becoming an invaluable asset. One well-rated Veterans Affairs staffer texted her boss to complain after she was fired. In text messages obtained by the Post, he replied, "It states it's due to your performance, which is not true. Your performance has nothing to do with this." Others were stunned to find themselves included in the probationary category, including a federal nurse with more than 5 years of government employment who recently moved under military orders with her spouse and had to switch agencies as a result, now out of a job. So that's what I was referring to there as one of the kind of flaws here, where she did serve for over the 2-year period to get past being probationary, but she ended up still getting fired because she had to switch agencies. A veteran of the National Park Service who has worked at parks including Yosemite, Shenandoah, and the Great Smoky Mountains, last year left a permanent position to accept a promotion in a new park. There she was told she'd have to serve 1 year of probation. On Valentine's Day, she was fired for performance and ending a quarter century of service. "It is very brutal," she said, "especially after working and dedicating most of my life to the NPS." So those are two examples there, and I want to get to the final one that broke my heart in a second, of people who have gone past that 2-year probationary period, but because they had to switch over agencies, or this person who worked for nearly 25 years in the National Park Service was told she'd receive a promotion, but she just had to serve 1 year as a technicality in that period, ended up getting fired because, the Doge groypers put it into an algorithm and she was classified as probationary. So, same as the nurse who has a military spouse who had to be temporarily probationary because she switched agencies. Now, here's the one at the end that they ended this article with. Sorry for construction noise out there, folks, if you're hearing that. Luke Graziani, a disabled Army veteran, was 5 weeks from completing his probation year on Friday when he logged into his work computer at the Bronx Veterans Affairs Hospital. Waiting on the screen was a boilerplate termination email citing performance concerns. Graziani printed out the message and took it to his boss, who was shocked, and promised to submit a request for exemption. "Your critical staff," Graziani recalled his boss saying. "We're going to try." Graziani, who is 45 and has 4 children, had believed until this weekend that his veteran status would protect his job. He served 20 years in the Army, first as a supply specialist and then in public affairs, deploying for 2 tours in Iraq and another 2 in Afghanistan before retiring in 2023. In the hour
JD Vance did.
Yeah, but apparently similar actually time as Tim Walz, who just came up, that was accused of stolen valor by JD Vance and co. In the hours after his termination, Graziani tried to figure out what to do. Then he thought of Douglas A. Collins, a newly appointed Veteran Affairs Secretary, who vowed in his confirmation hearing that he will not stop until we succeed on behalf of the men and women who have worn the uniform. Graziani sat down and composed a letter. "You see, I am a veteran too, just like you, Secretary Collins. I spent those same hot nights in Iraq, waiting for the all clear after an incoming round set off the alert system, praying that there wouldn't be another," he wrote. Then he asked for his job back. "This can't be how my service to my country ends." As of Monday, Collins had not replied. So, that's that. Another effect of the cuts was this USAID thing. There were many U.S. personnel overseas when they just decided to cut it off, including this woman and her husband, who is now suing the Trump administration over this, and I think under a pseudonym, so we don't have their full name. It's, as the Jane Doe or ex-Joe, et cetera. So this is Kyle Cheney of Politico. We could just go to his summary. Another medical horror story in a court affidavit from a USAID employee stationed overseas says his pregnant wife was not medically evacuated, for emergency health care because of directives from Washington. Took intervention of a U.S. senator to reverse, but it was too late. Now, it seems like the pregnancy was okay, but she needed to be medically evacuated, and she could not. Cheney continues in the second part of this thread. The employee, identified only as Terry Doe, says he's been in touch with 25 other pregnant Foreign Service officers who are fearful their care will be cut off if the agency closes down completely on March 8th. So, there you have it, folks.
Relatedly, there's a Bloomberg article. Food head at FDA resigned, citing numerous job cuts in division. Now, this one's interesting to me because it goes at one of the core central brand propositions that got a lot of rubes to support this administration this time. Because the guy, Jim Jones, the head of the food division of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, who oversaw the agency's banning of the food dye Red No. 3 earlier this year, stepped down on Monday. So the entire point of the sort of Maha bullshit that, people like Russell Brand and stuff are paid to pretend is real, because I do think that was a real part of the coalition that Trump added this time, was people who are upset at the type of garbage that capitalists pump into our food. Not really addressing that, turns out. Get rid of the guy who actually was addressing these things, because who cares? And there's a piece here, if you can just pull up this Carl Bayer piece, which I think is important, because I think some people on the left are, for some reason, persuaded by writers like Leighton Woodhouse at Compact Magazine, who's sort of like a Timu Michael Schellenberger.
Curious who you're referring to.
He had this article. So Carl's, go up to the top of Carl's. Carl's is, no federal workers are not, quote, elites. I regret to inform you that Compact Magazine is at it again. I would go check out carlbayer.com because he responds to Compact Magazine's assertion that these are somehow elite. When I would say the hacks like Leighton Woodhouse and Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and all these sort of like for-hire mercenary hacks, you're more of the elites than these people who work in whatever fucking administration that they were employed at.
You mean the 30,000 federal workers in Kansas City, the city's largest employer, are not as economic elite as Matt Iglesias, whose pieces are regularly read by people in the Biden administration? Yeah, I think, and I know a lot of people aren't persuaded by this sort of stuff, but there are a few people that seem to think that these sort of losers have a point, and no, they're charlatans. Yeah, that's exactly right. Will from Indiana, I'm going to start a poly-market bet to see whether or not Tom Homan uncontrollably sobs on air about AOC. Dude is clearly infatuated. Given the alternative, this is probably what we want more from our border czars. Speaking of Will from Indiana, we'll put a link to this below, but I did do Will's podcast yesterday. Will, great friend and fan of the show, regular IMer into ESPN and into the Majority Report, as I just read. His podcast is called Crimson Misery. He covers college basketball, among other things, but we talked about a lot of things: the Democrats, the NFL, the traders, if you're into reality TV. So check it out, folks. Crimson Misery. Was really fun getting to talk to Will yesterday. International Socialists. Anti-SSRIs is not a crank issue. Lots of gold standard studies, double-blind and systematic reviews show SSRIs are about effective as placebo in mild, moderate depression. You should get a good socialist mental health service user and activist to explain the issues of SSRIs and side effects and dependency, stopping medication, and other ways Big Pharma hid the evidence of their own problems with SSRIs. They are the benzodiazepines of this age. To be honest with you, that is not the kind of content that I want to put out there. SSRIs help a lot of people, and I don't necessarily think that the science is clear enough to cast aspersions on it right now. I agree. I don't think I don't think the evidence is clear. I think I've seen contrary assertions that
actually conditions are worsening in society, that might be a reason for, like, maybe these things do work, but just not enough to counteract the
capitalism,
increasing alienation in society.
Yeah.
Look, this is not a sort of medical show.
Yes.
But I don't think that's. I mean, I think there is a worry over a lot of this stuff that can be critiqued, but I don't think it's clear enough to say that.
Okay, let's take another call here. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Sean. I'm calling from Washington State. How are you today?
Doing well, Sean. How are you?
Doing well too, thanks. So I just wanted to call and follow up sort of on one of the comments that Matt was saying and you about these federal workers not being elite. You know, I living out west, one of the main ways in which I interact with our federal government is through resource agencies, and I hunt and I do other things outside. And when about 3,400 Forest Service employees were fired as a result of these cuts, and when I became aware of this, I reached out to some hunting and conservation groups that I'm a part of, and I asked them to stand up for these workers. And it was just amazing to see some of the comments that people who are supposedly, avid users of our public land, they believe that these cuts were going to be made primarily to elites. There are no elites in the Forest Service. Upper management. That's not what happened. These cuts are to working people who live, especially in these resource agencies like the BLM and Forest Service. They live in very remote areas where oftentimes these agencies or these offices, ranger districts, those sort of things, are one of the larger employers. I mean, remote central Idaho, remote southeastern Oregon, remote northeastern Washington, Montana, Wyoming. These places are not.
I know, but
it's just shocking.
Well, this is where the Democrats need to take a federal worker who's from one of the areas you're talking about and come up with some grandstanding bill about protecting the federal workforce, like the Lake and Riley Act, and say, yeah, it's the Luke Graziano Act, protecting our veterans from Doge and Donald Trump and billionaires. Now, do it now. Because what you're saying is they have left a vacuum on so many issues, but including this one, that they could be categorizing these federal workers as your neighbors, as opposed to faceless bureaucrats, which is entirely a right-wing ideology. But you have guys like Josh Shapiro coming out and saying, we've got to be efficient. You've got Moskowitz or whatever that freak's name is on the Doge caucus endorsing all this kind of thing. And then you have Hakeem Jeffries, I guess, with his thumb up his ass and waiting so they can use this as leverage in the budget negotiations. But if we had a functioning political party, this was better with Alan Grayson going on the House floor and saying the Republicans' healthcare plan for you is to die quickly. Where is that right now? Who is our version of that?
Yeah. A lot of it is the efficiency mindset, which efficiency, when said by these people, is profit maximization and more money for speculators who should be taxed way more than they already are, to even more money for them to play with. But I completely agree. I come from a conservative background, hunted multiple times a year, multiple different types of licenses, but also come from a family that knows the importance of a game and fish department for making sure that all this stuff is regulated. But I know, frankly, a lot of hunters are weekend warriors who just buy the fucking gear and go Donald Trump Jr. it for the weekend and don't give a fuck about the land that they're on because they're probably on some rich guy's land anyway. There's no sort of actual stewardship thing there. And one of the big laments I've had is that people who do hunt and do enjoy the outdoors completely missed what capitalists are doing to all of that shit. And it's not because environmentalists off-put them. It's because corporate propaganda has completely blind them to the threat that's coming for their lands, to continue privatization it, to make it really what hunting is in the UK, which is a rich man's hobby.
Yeah.
That's 100% right. That is 100% right. And, I don't know if you guys are aware of this because living back east, and I'm not sure, I don't get the impression that you're plugged into, the things that go on in the hunting community, maybe the public lands arena. But there was a lawsuit that was filed by the state of Utah, essentially to declare basically unappropriated, which means unimproved federal lands that were managed by the BLM. Basically, give those back to the state of Utah. There is a real push in Western states to have our public land turned over to these states that have no budget to manage them. And then what will happen is that public land will be sold off to developers and capitalists. And these people who think that they
for like mineral mining
who
too.
Enjoy, yeah, right, well, or like yes, and possibly ski resorts, possibly housing developments. Things.
Yeah.
The one interesting thing is, Donald Trump, during the campaign, discussed the possibility of developing some of these federal lands. There's no water to live in these arid public lands. I'm sorry, these Western public lands are extremely arid. You cannot develop those lands for like dense housing. And the Colorado River is already overly appropriated, which is, a lot of the Bureau of Land Management land is in that, Colorado River basin. So the point of it is, this is an attempt to privatize our public land. It is a first step to privatizing our public land. They've cut the government. They're going to, now the next thing will be, see how poorly our public land is being administered because it's owned by the government. Private enterprise can do better. Let's work towards privatizing this land. And then it will be accessible only to the elites.
Yep. That's the model. Have you heard of Big Sky in Montana?
Yes.
That's the model, right? Like I believe, or maybe it's not that exact resort, but there's a resort next door that's just a private mountain. Yep. Like Tom Brady, I think, has a house there or whatever. Like
owned by a Massachusetts-based hedge fund.
Right.
Entire town.
That's what it is.
Yeah, and this is the network state that the tech guys are talking about too.
That's right. Well, I'll say this. Matt was talking about Western hunting turning into something like it is in Europe for only the truly wealthy. That is what's happening. And there are people who, like for instance, Joe Rogan, who goes and hunts on these private tracts where he gets a hunt. I don't know if he gets it for free or not, but he's basically hunting on these what are effectively private game preserves that are abutted by public land, but which the public cannot get access to. And the hunt itself is worth tens of thousands of dollars. And then he posts these things on social media or talks about it on his podcast. And there's a growing movement in the hunting community to stand up to this sort of activity. And when he discusses in his podcast and talking about like overcrowding issues, he said, "Hey dummies, just go find another trailhead. Let them eat cake."
Right.
The rich boys are on this one. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. And I'm almost done here. The last thing I want to say is my wife is actually a migration lawyer in the same community as Ronald Reagan, and I just would like to say that it's a scary time. And for the first couple weeks, maybe a month of this presidency, she was coming home nightly, if not in tears, almost in tears. Her clients were in tears meeting with her, and I just want to encourage everybody to look at the people who these efforts are being taken against as our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, and to stand up for them, and because they are scared, and that's all I have to say. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. All right. Cast Iron Jake, Utah's specific plan is to actively take all the national public lands in Utah and then sell them off and privatize all of it. They spent a couple million trying to see the federal government sue. I think you mean the federal government over it.
It's the war on the public anything. It's enclosure. It's Tim Heidecker saying it's free real estate. That's what it is.
Dave from Jamaica, great point, Matt. I think people confuse working poor in rural areas with fail-son LARPers who pretend to be that. Yeah, I mean, it's the same people that confuse the folks that stormed the Capitol on January 6th with like working class Americans when they were owners of like pool cleaning companies from a suburb in, Missouri that could afford to fly to DC to storm the Capitol.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think, the category error with like the idea of a so-called small business owner is sometimes like people in that, like, very conservative people who are pretty wealthy because they either like own a roofing company or like plumbers because plumbers do make a lot of money, or hot tub installment companies, things like that. They're small business owners, but they're also, that doesn't mean they can't possibly be reactionary or like, have very, very far right-leaning tendencies.
Right. Exactly right. Sorry. So I've been meaning to do this and it's a little old, but, the 6, Bradley. Just because we're on this topic, Rick Perlstein, historian, we've had him on the show, posted this. It's just something that we need to be keeping in mind here because there was another airplane disaster, like right after we went on air yesterday, and it's unclear if the cuts affected this. And I don't want to draw any conclusions, but at the end of the day, like, we need to start to politicize airplanes falling out in the sky. Like, we should be having a grandstanding bill on the House floor brought by some Democrat that uses the name of one of the federal workers that has been fired. We just read this example of the 20-year disabled Army veteran who was fired from his job at a Bronx veterans hospital. He has 4 kids and has served his country admirably and for his entire life. Wrote to the VA secretary asking for his job back, saying, I'm a good performer, isn't getting it back. His name is Luke Graziani. Frankly, the Democrats should endorse the Luke Graziani bill, which protects the federal workforce from the gutting of the administrative state by a billionaire robber baron. They should also be introducing a bill that's like about, say, the Trump airplane crash bill, Doge airplane crash. I mean, I'm coming up with this off the top of my head. Come up with something more clever, but message this to the public, okay? We can't just have historians like Rick or shows like ours giving these examples. The Democrats have to demonstrate this on the House or the Senate floor whenever debate is open and put names to this, like the Lake and Riley Act, which they used to crack down on immigration. Use this thing to your advantage. Bradley, go ahead.
I'm just saying they're always happy to brand something. They definitely have staffers who are literally hired to create these funny abbreviations for bills where it's like a New Jersey congressman like Josh Gottheimer introducing a bill to be like, the Mooch Act to get other states to pay more in federal income taxes because New Jersey pays more for other lower end tax states in the country. Like, you can't do it for something like this when they're literally like, it's not even like the sky is falling. No, planes are literally falling out of the sky.
Falling out, and
that plane was upside down in Toronto.
Yes, and there were already a shortage of air traffic controllers. Then yesterday, Musk and Trump fired tens of probationary employees working in aviation safety. Again, these are just employees that have worked there for 2 years or under, or switched agencies who have less protections, so Musk can fire them if he wants. Still going to affect it. They're doing important work to aid and assist the air traffic controllers who are already understaffed. So Rick Perlstein has this example. This is from a friend of his who's a retired air traffic controller. This is the letter that he wrote today to his the other day to his senator. I wanted to read it for folks. Dear Senator, I'm writing as a constituent, former FAA air traffic controller for 26 years and currently airline transport related commercial pilot. On Friday, hundreds of FAA technicians and engineers were terminated. These technicians and engineers maintain every piece of equipment that keeps flying safe, from the radars to the ILS to the ATC automation. They were identified as probationary, and there is a reasonable speculation that AI was used to find probationary employees, assuming that meant that they were new hires. That is not an accurate assumption. A newly hired federal employee is probationary and may be subject to at-will termination, but the term probationary is also applied to promotions to describe not that you are a probationary employee, but if the promotion or transfer is not successful, the employee would return to the pre-promotion position. This allows the government to retain needed expertise. As I mentioned, those were the examples of people who became probationary because they moved from like one park or, to another, or from one agency to another, etc. This allows the government to, However, even that is not the case in these positions, as workers were indeed succeeding in their new roles. FAA technicians undergo years of specialized training to maintain mission-critical systems that cannot be replaced quickly. In the 30 years since I began my controller career, we have never had a surplus of technicians and engineers. To the contrary, it is a challenge to keep these jobs filled. Once our aviation safety infrastructure is compromised, it will take decades to bring it back. Money will not be saved and lives may be lost. We need your help to raise attention to this issue and use whatever tools of checks and balances available to undo this reckless action. Sincerely, Dylan Sullivan, who's the name of the friend of Rick Perlstein. We now know that Musk is trying to put SpaceX employees in these positions who do not have the qualifications. We just had the deadliest federal aviation disaster since 9/11 on U.S. soil, where 67 people were killed at Reagan, like in the days after they announced these massive cuts, sending our systems of regulations into chaos. We know that it's less safe to fly, and the Flight Attendants Union will say this during government shutdowns for these very reasons. But it was put on steroids with these DOGE cuts that came in, and then what do you know? A plane going into Reagan National Airport crashes with a military helicopter, and dozens of people die.
Because of an air traffic mistake, from what the appearances of it looks like so far.
And where are the Democrats? Everybody has a fear of flying. If the Republicans can tap into a fear of needles so that we don't have vaccines anymore, so it pretends like they care about our health as opposed to, funding universal health care or something like this, can the Democrats weaponize the fact that everybody in the world has a fear of flying and Republicans might make it more likely that you die in the air? I mean,
yeah.
Introduce a bill. Trump's aviation death bill, whatever. Make up some silly acronym. Or they could spend $6 million on consultants to come up with MAGA, what was it? Ultra MAGA?
Extreme MAGA Republicans.
Extreme MAGA Republicans.
Because MAGA just doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I'll do people a favor. I'm not going to blame Democrats on this, but even though some of them supported the rush for profits that has led to the burdening certain airports about this. But the truth is,
it's okay. I checked that off.
In society, we are not investing in the right things. We should be investing more in schools, in air traffic, in the safety stuff. But the problem is that means less money for profiteer speculators like Elon Musk and all of his friends to play with and to make more riches, making money with money and not doing any work. But here's a piece in American history, the PATCO strike and the decline of labor. This is in American History Journal in 2021. In 1981, President Reagan decisively broke the strike in Federal Aviation Administration's air traffic controllers, which had been organized by their union. Because of this timing, its notoriety, and its impact in encouraging private sector employers to follow Reagan's example and break strikes, the PATCO debacle contributed significantly to the continuing decline of the labor movement through the decades following 1981. The breaking of PATCO took place at the crucial inflection point of U.S. labor. The walkout, which started on October 3rd, 1981, took place in every U.S. state and territory, and Americans watched it play out in real time on live television. They saw President Reagan warn strikers that since they were government workers, their walkout was illegal, issuing an ultimatum that they would be fired in 48 hours if they did not return to work. Then they saw President Reagan fire more than 11,000 strikers who defied his order, replacing them with military contractors and hastily trained substitutes, all with strong public backing. And I would say this is just a continuation of that whereas Reagan went after them, and both of the impetus is the exact same. The safety and the power of labor is secondary to the money, freeing up money for profiteer parasites to play with.
Yep. All right, guys. We'll have some more fun clips tomorrow. I mean, it's 2:30 already. Where does the time go?
Of Russell Brand talking about the selfie social contract.
Yeah, let's say that for tomorrow where we have more time, right? And you have to go, right? I would assume for left reckoning.
Eventually,
no?
yeah.
Eventually. But I did want to take this call really quickly. That'll be our final call of the day. Calling from an 813 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma. Hi, Matt. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Everyone's doing well. How are you doing?
Well, I'm really thankful that you took my call. My name is Annie Fitzgerald, and I've been a long-time listener. But a couple weeks back, Sam read a IM that Charlie DeGenmer sent on my behalf regarding raising funds for my GoFundMe because my chemotherapy copays went up and they actually doubled this month. They went from like $100 to $200 per treatment. And Sam read my IM about my GoFundMe.
Right.
And MR people came out. Within like 2 days, y'all helped me raise about $3,000. And I just had to get on here to say thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. I am about 2/3 of the way to my goal. Right now, I'm raising funds so that I can continue to receive my chemotherapy treatment, as well as raise a copay for a desperately needed new wheelchair, because my wheelchair was actually broken on an airplane flight.
Oh my God.
And so it literally bent the frame and it could break at any point. And the airline refused to fix it. And so I have to get a new one. And I am in school right now, and I am active within my DSA chapter, among other things that I'm doing. I also ran for state representative last year, and called in a couple times last year about that. But I just really, really wanted to call in and just say thank you so much to everyone. I also want to thank the mods for continuing to share my links in chat.
We just put the link up, and we're going to put it in our description wherever people are listening to or watching this. But just sorry to cut you off, Annie, but I just want to give people listening a sense. You've raised $3,955, and your goal is $6,000. So we're not too far away. And some folks in our audience, if you have either the ability to donate, or if you could just share it on social media, it would be enormously helpful. Because I'm so sorry that happened, Annie. I mean, your wheelchair getting damaged and then the airline not agreeing to pay for it, that doesn't sound shocking, unfortunately, to me, but it feels like we can definitely get you there, hopefully, with the help of our audience. So I appreciate you calling. How are you feeling right now?
Thank you. I'm actually at treatment right now. And to be honest, I'm just really, really grateful to even be able to be at treatment right now, thanks to you guys. So I definitely plan on running for office again next year and continuing to do what I can to support my community. So I just really, really appreciate everyone for all the kind words and all the support, because honestly, it helps keep me going. So,
thanks,
thank
Annie,
you so much.
I hope that we could be a little bit of a distraction as you're having your treatment. We're thinking of you, and we'll make sure to keep you in mind and keep your GoFundMe in mind as we keep as we go along with this broadcast this week, we won't forget it, and we'll continue to plug it. Okay.
Thank you so much. You guys have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, stay strong, Annie. Cold Dog writes in. I mean, we love you. Yeah. So many nice messages. Yeah. Appreciate you, Annie. Thank you. We're going to turn off the phone lines, read some IMs, and get out of here.
One note from Pablo Manriquez at Pablo Reports on Twitter. So far, we have no eyes into Gitmo, no phone calls in or out from to detainees, no press access, and a growing inmate population of Venezuelans with no confirmed criminal records or gang ties.
Who could have thought it?
Hey, but you can object to Trump as much as you want, but don't do it in a way that, Young Turks doesn't approve of.
It's just Dave Rubin again. It's really incredible how we just have seen the same playbook over and over. It's almost like it's lucrative. Mr. Melancholy, I work at the post office. We have a guy who drives a Cybertruck to work. I want to berate him every day.
Idiots. God, it's I mean, the good thing is I do think the Jew. I see less online about it. It's kind of went the way of the Apple VR goggles. Remember they were made a big splash when they released them. Does anybody talk about that anymore?
No one does. Yeah. Sent with lasers. Sorry. I have to fly a bunch this year for tour. I'm thinking I should just quit touring until Trump is out of office. I love it, but I'm not about to fall out of the sky. So Elon could try to fill the hole in his heart with money that Hassan took from him when Grimes started spending time with Hassan.
I ultimately think he can fly. I'm not going to be afraid to take flights. I don't have any planned, but I think they are still rare. They're
still rare.
But the issue is concern and a long-term one, which is that we are not investing in the right things in this country.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
The bipartisan.
We still don't know the effects of this mass firing of the FAA workers, hundreds of them. I know that it's probably safe, but it's definitely less safe than it was.
It's less safe than it was, absolutely. And the Build Back Better should have had a bunch of money for this sort of thing. And instead, what we get the messaging on it is Nancy Pelosi saying this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, which is her code to her donors saying, don't worry, we're still going to be frugal and austere in terms of spending. We don't have that luxury. This shit's falling apart. And yeah, I would probably, if I could take a train instead of a plane, probably do it.
Yeah, can this please be, I know Hayden Clark has been joking about this on Twitter, now it's time for us to, I guess we're investing in transit. We're not, but it would be a great opportunity if that was the goal, but it's not. It's about Elon.
Cybertruck Hyperloops.
Yeah, Elon wants, toy in space without daddy telling him no. Ostentatious. Emma, this is exactly right. Adopt a federal worker. Hakeem Jeffries should be giving them his platform. Let him speak. Give these vultures at cable news the red meat that they want. Let the federal worker tell them what happened to them, and more importantly, who is to blame for it. Use it for politics and get back these people's jobs. Ryan from Rochester. A trans man was kidnapped and brutally tortured to death in Benton, New York. Will the Democrats bring up a bill to protect trans people?
No.
That abortion nurse, you have to wean off SSRIs just like you have to take a course of steroids. The weaning is just so your body can get back to regulating on its own. Dependence is not the same as addiction. It is very easy to wean and generally has no side effects other than the resumption of symptoms that were being treated by the SSRI. This is so ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, Morpheus writes in, SSRIs are indispensable in cases of severe depression. Sorry, mild to moderate cases are better treated with therapy and lifestyle change. What is that IMer's point? Absurd. H-dub, that is absolutely incorrect. SSRIs are flawed, but highly supported by the research as beneficial for anxiety and depression disorders. Yes.
There you go. Now, don't draw us into these waters again, please.
Yes.
Because I'm happy we swim out of it.
All right, 3 more. Anon, but not Q. Every government job I have started off as probationary. In my experience, it's just a way for them not to give you full benefits for the first 6 months or a year. Yeah, I mentioned that, but it's also just standard for some of the for some of the agencies to get until you cross that 2-year threshold. But I explained it, I think, before. CPG, there you go again, Matt, forgetting how we need to funnel capital to the real heroes, the consultants. And the final IM of the day. Ultraviolet, the visuals for the M-Majority song are finished. Check your email. Subject, M-Majority Report visuals video.
Check out tomorrow, folks.
Ultraviolet, you are too kind. Oh, and tomorrow we'll be joined by one RM Brown in the fun half, which will be very fun.
Toilets.
Don't fully get... should I bring in my weed vape? Just to go to town with them? Honestly, it could be... Well, maybe I'll save it for 2 p.m. All right, guys. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and